Hello and welcome to today's edition of Turn Your Magic All the Way Up, a ridiculous guide to discovering yourself after narcissistic abuse. The little book with the long title. Available on Amazon, excuse me, in Kindle, Paperback, and Audiobook, read by me on audible.com. Or just subscribe and tune in here. I've been reading a chapter for free every week because the point in me writing this book, which spewed out of me in 30 days, I'm still wishing that would come back so I could do it again, but I digress, is to educate people and to help them heal. It's not about making money. So what's the best way to do that? Put it out there for free, man. So that's what we're doing. I did write this book with an accompanying soundtrack on Spotify. I will put the link to the Spotify playlist below. And the songs are listed throughout my chapters. And you can go back and listen to what I was listening to as I wrote it if you're interested at all or not. I know music is subjective. All right, here we go. Chapter 6 is titled The Mental and Physical Health Connection. Song Blue Neck by Chris Houseman. I've kind of been all over the place with this book, but that's what happens when you're excited about all the knowledge you want to share, all the people you feel you can help. I hope people are going to read this shit and laugh along with me and feel like I did when I found Lisa A. Romano, that they're not alone. I know they will feel like I am a member of their tribe and they are a member of mine, excuse me, even if we will never meet. That feeling that we aren't alone is a necessity. For me, I get that from my groups on Facebook and TikTok. Although, side note, TikTok's been banned, so I'm glad I started this channel. I have met in person about half of the people I know as friends on Facebook. There was a point in my life when I lived in East Texas where I had to get the fuck out of there every once in a while before I unalived a redneck. I started flying or driving to different cities to meet the friends that I had made online. My first taste of real joy and letting my inner child choose what to do was visiting these people and getting to know my tribe back then, because the area I was living in was not the demographic for my tribe. I had found a few lovely souls nearby, but I found a lot more awesome, liberal, more progressive people on Facebook from a Bernie Sanders supporters page who were scattered all over the U.S. We were all looking for the same thing, more online friends with empathetic views like us. I love my positive little bubble I've created online, and so far every friend I've met has been an awesome human, a fun experience, a great story, and a lovely memory. I hope to meet the rest of them someday. I am sorry. Let me take a sip of my life straw water because I live in an RV and I can't trust the water to be completely wonderful. This is life, people. I don't think I have that many subscribers, so probably no one's going to see this and care. Here we go. Back to the story. Life lesson number 6. Travel as often as you can, as far as you can. Travel teaches you how humanity is connected and is a fantastic mental break we all need now and then to blow the cobwebs out of the brain. I've been to Cuba, China, Mexico, New Zealand, England, France, and Belize. I've learned different things from each place, and I hope I learn a lot more. Travel gives you the chance to empathize with those who don't have it as good as we do and to be really grateful for what we do have. If you haven't learned anything from all your travels, then I fear that you are living a life below that veil of consciousness and you are asleep, the walking dead, because that should be all travel is about, is learning. Life lesson number 7. And every time I read this life lesson number 7, I'm like, I did not word that right. And it's a real pet peeve of mine, but me and technology are not the best of friends, and I don't want to go back in and edit the book because I'm afraid I'll fuck up the whole thing. So there's all these things that it's like, that's wrong. This is one of them. The way I worded it is wrong. I'm going to read it the way it says it, and then I'm going to tell you. Life lesson number 7. Never lose your curiosity. We're good to that point. To stop learning. I don't think that's worded right. I think it's supposed to be never lose your curiosity to keep learning. Again, I was on some things whenever I wrote this book, and some things slipped through. Forgive me. Life lesson number 7. We're going to reword it right here and now. Never lose your curiosity to keep learning. Song, I Lived It by Blake Shelton. I research everything, and this thirst for knowledge has been of great benefit, especially when it comes to my health and healing from narcissistic abuse. I try to have the most information I can gather before deciding anything, and whether that be a place to visit when I travel, what kind of truck to buy, best new mattress, best vitamins and supplements, etc. My innate curiosity and need to understand what had happened to me is what drove me to learn as much as I could about why I was trapped in the toxic cycle that had become my life. It is what helped me find the tools necessary to heal from the abuse I experienced and to not stay stuck forever. I feel terrible for all our ancestors who lived such hard lives that exploring their emotions was just way low on the priority list when it came to staying alive beyond the age of 10 and having a kid when you're 13. It's pretty hard to focus on why you keep repeating toxic patterns when you're out plowing the fields and not dying of dysentery or going off to war and living through the Great Depression. I get it. I feel badly for the harshness of what must have been their existence. If Lisa is right and we are here to find our own divine light, grow, and experience joy, then those generations got the short end of the stick. And again, we are really lucky to be here, even when it seems to be falling down around us. We're lucky to be living in this teeter-tottering world where we are currently tipping more narcissistic than empathic, but I truly feel that it has to swing to the compassion side next. And gosh, I hope that's soon. I don't intend to let down any of those strong, independent, too smart for their own good women in my ancestry line. They all fought really hard for better lives for their family. My cousin and I both chose to remain child-free, and we are all that's left, so we're the end of the line. We're both as close to enlightenment as this line could ever be, so perhaps that's why it turned out this way, the universe putting us here for this very reason. I've seen the energy in this world show me stranger things, so I don't doubt anything anymore. Remember to keep an open mind and entertain any idea. Allow all daydreams to travel where they will. I'm also allowing emotional realizations to hit me as truthfully as possible and let my tears flow freely, even if it means crying multiple times a day. Often I cry from the pure joy of being alive. Most often it's triggered by music, but every time it's therapeutic to let it go. Allowing my emotions freedom without judgment is immensely freeing. It is not weak to cry. And it is not weak to feel, as I had mistakenly believed for so long. And that goes for men and women, by the way. Weeping is a way of washing the soul, and being vulnerable and allowing yourself to feel is the most courageous thing that anyone can do. Song, Setting the World on Fire by Kenny Chesney and Pink. Back when I was married and living in Texas, I used to take pride in the fact that I hadn't cried in over 10 years. Turns out antidepressants will do that to you. I wore it like a badge of honor that I hadn't felt anything that triggered my emotions enough to make me tear up. That should have been a warning sign, but being raised by a narc father who valued coldness, well, you can see why I was proud of that. I should not have been proud of that. It was a big indicator of something being very wrong. I had been on antidepressants since my early 20s and had tried nearly every brand of SSRI there was up until 2019. Serafem, Lexapro, Effexor, Paxil, Wellbutrin, Abilify, etc. ad infinitum. My ex-husband had said shortly after we got together, "You don't need those anymore now that you're with me, right? I make you happy, don't I?" I thought, well, maybe he's right. so I stopped taking them to see what would happen. Within a short period of time, I found myself in a rage, taking my anger out on my precious pets, who to me are like my kids, and ended up throwing something heavy I'd been holding at my ex-husband's foot. When it involved physical violence, I immediately recognized that this problem was too big for me to handle myself. I made immediate plans to ship myself off to California for a month-long outpatient stay for anger management at a treatment center post-haste. Physical reactions like that were a hard boundary for myself, and I needed fixing. Something was definitely wrong. Sadly, with all the therapy I received while an outpatient in 2012, I only became more codependent by focusing on those around me who, quote unquote, had it so much worse than me, and I had nothing to complain about. I bet you say that too. More subconscious guilt tripping and toxic negative self-talk. I was so helpful with everyone that the staff told me, "You should be a life coach. You're so good at boosting up all the others." Yet no one ever put the label on me that I needed to hear. I was a classic codependent. I wanted to save everyone but me. Why didn't any therapist tell me, "You are a flaming codependent"? Because I clearly was. After a month at the treatment center, they just put me back on the SSRIs, and I assumed, well, this is me now, and that I would always have to be on them. I was on and off them in one form or another for over 20 years. I frequently tried to wean off of them only to find myself in deep depression and start taking them once again. This kind of cycling is highly discouraged and can affect the synapses in your brain negatively, but I didn't want to be on them. However, I also didn't want to be depressed anymore, so I kept trying new pills or dosage levels. Song Therapy Session by NF. I was also on birth control well into my 40s because even though I knew in my 20s I didn't ever want kids, when I asked my doctor if I could get my tubes tied, they told me no because, quote unquote, I might change my mind later. So much hidden sexism, toxic masculinity, and misogyny in this world. Life lesson number 8. Being woke is hard. Do it anyway. Who knows how my hormones were affected by the birth control pills for that length of time, but I can for sure say the antidepressants did their job a little bit too well. They just made me dead inside and probably helped kill my marriage. I was over-medicated and given pills for things that I should have been sorting out in therapy, only I didn't know it. I had unrecognized and unresolved childhood trauma that was showing up in my marriage and in other areas. I was a perfectionist with control issues. I still am, and I'm working on that. It was hard to pinpoint why certain things were triggering anger in me, and when I lost my temper, I felt ashamed, which only made me depressed and hate myself. Anger was the only emotion I seemed to be able to fully express, and that scared me. It's why I ran off to a treatment center at the first sign of it, possibly getting out of control. I wasn't ever taught anything about anger except that it was bad because anytime my dad was angry, he was scary. I was never allowed to be angry as a kid, so I didn't know how to be angry other than to be out of control angry, what my dad had modeled for me. All the unrecognized trauma bits would have to be put together first for me to see these triggers for what they were and handle them in a mature fashion. The antidepressants made my moods more level and my anger manageable, sure, but I couldn't feel much of anything at all. I lost all interest in sex, even telling my husband to open up the marriage and go find someone else. It's not that I didn't love him, I just didn't have the energy or the emotion to give me the drive and want to be sexual. Bless him, he never took me up on that offer, but I would not have blamed him at all if he had. The antidepressants dulled all my senses. I couldn't cry. I was bored. I was a perfectionist and impossible to please. I felt ill at ease all the time. My inner dialogue was telling me I had absolutely no right to be unhappy, when I had so much to be grateful for, and yet I was depressed even on the antidepressants. I punished myself for not being happy, which only made me more depressed. A vicious cycle. I shoved down all my emotions for so long because I couldn't recognize them for what they were, and I kept guilt-tripping myself into believing I had no right to feel the way I did. Of course I was depressed. In 2014, I got really sick. Looking back on it now and putting all the pieces together, I essentially forced my body into a sleep-like state and into what I can only describe as an quote-unquote emotional coma. I had worn myself out by shoving my emotions down and drugging them into submission, which took such a toll on my mental health that it wore me out physically too. I had ignored my inner emotional self, and it essentially said, "Bye, Felicia," and checked out. It felt like I was half asleep, even when I was awake. I was so tired, so drained, so depleted that I ended up having to quit my job. I was falling asleep at my desk. I was having a hard time, and I'm getting choked up because, man, that's a memory. Oh, I hope that never comes back, because being this tired, I tried to explain it. Ugh. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I was falling asleep at my desk. I was having a hard time staying awake driving home. And as soon as I did get home, I ate dinner and went immediately to bed. I had to take a year off work to try to figure out where my energy went and what was wrong with me. I spent nearly 6 months bedridden, only getting up to eat, use the bathroom, go to the doctor, and go back to sleep. That's it. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew I was more exhausted and could barely function. I was more than exhausted and could barely function anymore. I did what I always do and researched the hell out of what might be wrong with me. I went to every doctor, ran every test, got every random diagnosis and recommendation on how to feel better. I was told it could be lingering Epstein-Barr virus from having mononucleosis as a teen, chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, chronic Lyme disease, hypothyroid, or depression. But I never really got a clear diagnosis on what was wrong. Only after an entire year of letting myself rest and trying a couple of treatments that either worked or the placebo effect kicked in, one of the two, I finally regained about half of my energy to live again. And I don't mean quote unquote energy to live in that I ever thought about killing myself. I was never suicidal. There was a point, however, where I would not have been upset if I just didn't wake up again. My life was pretty damn miserable when I was in my mystery emotional coma and asleep for 20 hours or more per day. It wasn't much of a life, and I was sad that is what I had become. Interestingly, both my mom and her mother, my grandmother, had similar experiences of being brought down by exhaustion for about a year and never finding out what it was. I suspect that they too suffered from repressed and unrecognized emotional trauma, which caused their emotional coma. Here's how I would describe how it felt. It was like waking up and immediately feeling like your entire body is swaddled in a very heavy, very dense, wet, warm wool blanket that weighs about 50 pounds. It's so heavy that every movement takes a supreme amount of effort from you to move any part of your body. Simply lifting your arm to grab your glasses on the nightstand would require an immense output of energy. Sitting up and swinging your legs over the bed was another blow to the energy stores. Many people with fatigue issues go by the quote-unquote spoon theory. The spoon theory is where you only wake up each day with only so many spoons to use, and they don't carry over from day to day. Each task you do takes a spoon away. Sometimes just getting up and taking a shower used up all your spoons for the whole day, and you couldn't do anything else except lay in bed and sleep. I also experienced migraines and roving joint pain, Everything from dull arthritic aches in my hands and fingers one day to sharp stabbing pains in my hip the next. Song Mary Jane by Alanis Morissette. Every movement was exhausting. It was like carrying a dead body around, because that's what I was doing. I was lugging my sleeping emotional body around with me, and it was heavy. That half of me was completely unconscious and not self-supportive anymore. I had abandoned myself so many times. I had ignored my intuition. I had complained about not being heard by others, but I wasn't listening to myself. I had drugged all my emotions out of me instead of talking to someone and recognizing why they happened. I was completely ignoring myself, so my subconscious said, "Fine, fuck you," and shut that shit right down. Half of me literally went to sleep, and I think it caused my body to go fucking haywire. I became very in touch with my body, every ache and pain, and of course I journaled. Of course I wrote it down, how I felt every day. I got an infrared sauna and I used that once per day. I did Epsom salt detox baths regularly. I did body scrubbing. I tried a low carb diet for years. I had regular chiropractic and sports massage appointments. I looked up every symptom I had online and learned about a myriad of different ailments it might possibly be, and which vitamins, supplements, and probiotics might help. I started a blog which got swallowed by the internet somehow, I don't know where it went, called The Search for a Proper Diagnosis. I was determined to fix myself because sleeping through life was just not an acceptable option for me. It was too depressing to consider. I wasn't giving up yet. I was only 38 years old. Toward the end of my recovery, I did finally go to therapy. At one point, I questioned if maybe I had some undiagnosed mental disorder, and with the right prescription, perhaps I could feel normal again. I was hoping for a diagnosis and a new pill that could fix me. Instead, my therapist encouraged me to get a part-time job rather than take on the stress of a full-time position again. I had told her I couldn't handle the pressure of 40 hours a week anymore, but that I felt terrible for not contributing to my household. I was staying depressed because I was tying my worth. Let me go back. I was staying depressed because I was tying my worth to what job I held and what I brought into the marriage. My mood improved greatly when I felt like I was contributing again, but it didn't help my energy level much. I was always still tired. Sidebar, did we spot the signs of classic codependency there? My worth was tied to what I contributed, not to who I was as a person. This might have been the first time my therapist mentioned the word codependent to me, but at the time it was just a word and I didn't put much stock into it. That time would come later. There was one drug that a doctor prescribed me during this time of sickness that worked and made me feel energetic and able to function again. It was called Provigil and was classified as an anti-narcolepsy medicine. I was on it for a little while and was fucking thrilled that it was working, but a physician's assistant one day said that they were taking me off of it because, quote unquote, it's basically meth in pill form. Damn it. I didn't care what they called it. It had worked, and I was sad to see it go. It instilled in me a healthy fear of trying crystal meth, though. I had heard all about how detrimental meth could be. I'd seen Breaking Bad, and it sounded and looked terrifying. If it gave me energy like the Provigil did, however, I knew I would probably like it and was bound to get addicted to it. Meth was one drug I had a healthy respect to avoid. At least at this point in my life, I did. But we'll get to the drugs chapter later. I was sick of being tired all the time, still. So I found the one holistic doctor in Texarkana, Arkansas, that could do acupuncture. I hadn't tried that route yet. On my first visit, he suggested it might be adrenal fatigue. I started going to him for weekly high-dose vitamin IVs, IVs literally, in the blood, to try to feed my body into healing itself again. I gradually started feeling better, and I was more appreciative of every day. The heavy blanket had not lifted, but it was now more of a wet towel instead. I will never know for sure what was wrong, and with each potential diagnosis from whichever doctor I visited, I would post on Facebook all about my new findings and be relieved to finally have a name for it. I became a huge advocate for chronic Lyme disease being recognized as a real illness. I learned an awful lot about thyroid test levels too. Song Sociopath by Olivia O'Brien. I am full of all kinds of bits and pieces of random information when it comes to the human body and illnesses after my medical mystery. I tried to pass some of what I learned on to NARC number 2 and number 3, but one thing about NARCs, they don't like you trying to help them. They resent it. NARC number 2 had a particularly interesting health issue that I believe is 100% absolutely tied to his repressed emotional issues and refusal to face the truth. First, he had told me that he had developed a very rare blood disease called immune thrombocytopenia, also called ITP, in his 20s. I had no way to prove or disprove this statement, so when I found that out, I went into full research mode. Codependency engaged. I was looking at vitamins that would help, statistics on recovering from the disease itself. Sorry, I have cats. And really went into full nurse mode purchasing supplements for him that he never took. I question now if this ITP story was even true. Narcs are pathological liars and will say anything to gain sympathy if they think they can use it against you. I've learned in my research of repressed emotions that one of the first places that is affected in the body is the stomach. Apparently, we carry a lot in our gut, literally. Probably why they say we should listen to it. If you ignore it, it will fuck you up. NARC number 2 had a curious issue with his bowels. Anytime we had to venture outside of the apartment, he had to game prep with Imodium at least 30 minutes beforehand. Whether it was going to the pool, going to the grocery store, going to grab a burger, going to a concert, it didn't matter. He could not leave the house without it. He was constantly terrified of shitting his pants for some reason. He said he'd had a colonoscopy, doctors had fully checked him out, and no one could find anything. If that isn't psychosomatic, then I don't know what is, and yet he could not put those pieces together himself. I wasn't about to try to convince him it was all mental, because walking on eggshells around him was my life. Don't rock the boat. Song 17 by Lauren Sanderson. NARC number 2 and number 3 deprived themselves of self-care. Both would go days without showering, shaving, allow themselves to get scruffy and dirty. Neither would brush their teeth regularly and generally just didn't take care of themselves. I remember feeling NARC number 3's feet at his house once and finding them freezing cold. I recommended that he put on some socks because I'd hate for him to lose a foot one day due to poor circulation. Instead of being thankful that I was concerned for his well-being, he snapped at me and told me not to tell him what to do. I did, however, notice he started wearing socks after that incident. My dad is another narc with curious hygiene etiquette. He rarely showers and will wear the same dirty, holey clothes until those around him just can't stand him anymore and ask him to clean up a little. His house is filthy, as was NARC number 3's, with fingerprints and dust everywhere. Refrigerator and stove dirty. It's almost as if they subliminally punish themselves for some reason linked to childhood trauma. As if they feel they are bad and therefore dirty and not deserving to be clean. They live a life of lack, quote unquote, feeling they don't deserve nice things and seem to enjoy wallowing in their own filth. Gross. My dad doesn't neglect going to doctors, at least. Neither did NARC number 2 when we finally got his Medi-Cal hooked up, which was a fiasco in and of itself. During COVID, NARC number 2 was trying to move his Medi-Cal over from LA County to Orange County, where he had moved in with me. I got to listen in on all the phone calls, and there were a ton of red flags there. They repeatedly told him the transfer was being done, only to have him call and check a week later and find that there was no indication it had been started at all. Also, no notes that he had even called them. he lost his shit and was really being a rude douchebag to this poor girl on the phone. And that's when I had to tell him, much as you would explain to a child, that A, don't take it out on this poor girl just trying to do her job today. And B, you being a douchebag probably had them flag your account where they purposely denied you any favors, so watch your mouth. I could see the light bulb go on in his brain when he realized the person on the other end of the phone was an actual human, and that maybe, just maybe, there were consequences to his actions. This was the second major demonstration of his lack of empathy, and it was eye-opening for me to watch. Also, once he started being nice to the people on the other end of that phone, surprise, his account was finally moved over properly. Imagine that. Another mental health is tied to physical health moment came just recently with my massage therapist. He told me the story of his mom who had passed away recently, and because of that, it had given him a new perspective on what's important in life. He said his mom had been the showrunner of the house, the one who paid all the bills and who took on all the stress. She passed away from cancer younger than she should have. When she passed, his father realized he didn't know how to do the basic things that a life requires because his wife had always done it for him. His mom had carried all the stress of the family and had died early, and his dad was stress-free and still healthy as a horse. Song Therapist by Mae Muller. Sidebar, I highly recommend sports massage as a self-care option, not only for physically feeling better, but for injury prevention. I discovered that it works for performance horses, and animals don't lie. It's the one thing I used to treat myself to weekly, and it helped my spinal fracture recovery time take about 2 weeks less than anticipated. Some form of taking care of your physical body should be in your regular self-care routine. Same story with my mom's first ex-husband and his wife. She was a high-stress, high-performance individual. He is a narcissist and takes on zero responsibility. Upon her retirement, she went to bed and never woke up. She never got the chance to relax, or perhaps in her sleep, she finally did relax, and after all that stress, for all those years, her body could finally really rest. So it did. But her ex-husband? Oh, he's still kicking and even survived COVID, and still a raging narcissist. Stress kills. We all need to learn how to recognize our past traumas, whatever they might be, and bring them to light before it literally makes us sick like it did to me. I'm grateful for my sickness, whatever the fuck it was, because a temporary shutdown is far better than a permanent one. I've got a lot of living left to do, and a whole lot more dreams to chase now that I'm living my life for that inner child and finding my passion again. I wish I could go back in time and tell my sick self, the one crying in bed alone, wondering if this was all life would be now, so sad and scared that it won't last forever. I wish I could tell her, I promise that you're going to find the answer was inside of you all along. You just have to be brave enough to face it and have the courage to take the steps to change. That's all any of us must do. But again, recognition is key. If you get sick and no one seems to know why, I promise you therapy will help. It might even fix you. That is the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 is California Girl, and hopefully I'll make this on time because I realize I'm a day late. But, life. Thanks for whoever's out there actually watching this. I just want to say thank you because I feel like I'm screaming into the void. Feel free to comment. It would be nice to know there's other humans out there. All right, love you guys. Bye.